the event of, so in the Cold War, a good example is if the Soviet Union took West Berlin, was it really credible that the United States would threaten to launch hundreds of nuclear weapons at Soviet cities? The Soviet Union probably didn't think so. Right? So in a deterrence by punishment versus deterrence by denial trade-off, which one do you think is more credible? Right? So in the case where an attacker is coming at you, it's more credible to threaten to kill their mother in response or to cut off their arm. What is an attacker more likely to do? It is disproportionate to threaten certain punitive actions. And so it is often more credible, and this is where the trade-off between the debate early in the Cold War about deterrence by punishment versus deterrence by denial turned on the credibility differences between the two. But deterrence by denial seemed to be more credible. The adversary is more likely to believe that you would try to stop them from achieving their objectives than to kill millions of innocent civilians that had nothing to do with the fight in the first place, after something had already happened. And so the United States ended up threatening both, right? So and part of it was that the size of the U.S. arsenal made it possible to threaten both. But I think there were many strategists who believed that the deterrence by denial missions were still more credible to the adversary. But at the heart of deterrence is this issue of credibility. And the third key is communication. The adversary needs to know that you have the capability and the credibility to threaten the punishment or deterrence by denial threat that you make. Right? You have to make a threat. It has to be published. The adversary has to know what the threat is. The adversary needs to know what objective you are laying a red line down for, and that you have the capability to inflict the punishment that you threaten. So there's a huge amount of great line. What's the point of a doomsday machine if you don't tell anybody about it? Right? For everybody, the adversary needs to know that undertaking certain actions will result in some punishment for deterrence to operate. So nuclear weapons and deterrence as a concept predated nuclear weapons. Right? The concept of ratcheting up the cost to try and deter an adversary, predates nuclear weapons by centuries. The dawn of warfare. But nuclear weapons fundamentally alter deterrence equations for several reasons, right? One, right? Even a Hiroshima bomb, 20 kilotons, could kill 100,000 people. You could kill cities, entire cities, with a single warhead. But more than that, the missile age really changed how deterrence could operate, because prior to nuclear weapons, what was the most destructive military technology in state industry? Anyone know? Before nuclear weapons in World War II, how did the United States and Allies and Germany attack? Strategic bombing and firebombing, right? And the problem was that you had to send hundreds of airplanes and sorties into enemy territory to inflict that kind of damage. So your own pilots and air force is at risk. Now with the missile age, you can launch warheads at no risk to your pilots. The numbers that you were required to destroy entire cities were much smaller. Right? So you can ratchet up the cost really quickly without incurring much cost yourself, in the way that strategic bombing and firebombing required of states prior to the advent of nuclear. And one shouldn't underestimate the psychological impact of an adversary being able to destroy entire cities with a single warhead from afar at very little risk to itself. Right? So nuclear weapons ratchet up the ease of imposing punishment in ways that didn't exist prior to the nuclear age. So nuclear weapons fundamentally change the terms of weight. Is everyone familiar with basically uranium, plutonium, nuclear weapons, right? So I don't need to go through uranium, plutonium, nuclear processes. Those are basic fission weapons. They have booster fission weapons. So what is important, I think, is most regional powers are operating, so India, Pakistan, South Africa, when it had nuclear weapons. In South Africa, a little known fact, South Africa had nuclear weapons from 1979 to about 1991. Most states start with fission weapons, move to boosted fission weapons. The advanced nuclear powers have fusion weapons. Most of the United States nuclear inventory is composed of these are thermonuclear weapons. Right? So think of the A-bomb, that's fission and boosted fission weapons. The H-bomb are fusion weapons. And the United States has extremely advanced dial-up, dial-down nuclear weapons, but they're all thermonuclear weapons, where there's the primary that ignites the fusion secondary. But most regional powers are operating here, right? So North Korea, India, Pakistan. Israel is assumed to have boosted fission devices, but it's possible they have fusion weapons. I know they never tested or acknowledged their nuclear forces. Britain is basically an adjunct force of the United States. They use their weapons from the United States for their Trident. So those are basically U.S. weapons. The French have fusion weapons. But India and Pakistan are operating in the fission, boosted fission range. I mean, that's important. When you can get the megaton yields, you're talking about characteristics of different weapons. The number that would be required to destroy an entire city are much lower than the fusion weapons, but obviously a fission or a boosted fission device can do a lot of damage as well. But once you have nuclear warheads, that's not, you're only halfway there in terms of operationalizing nuclear arsenal. I think this is often forgotten when we talk about the proliferation process. States need more than just nuclear weapons and warheads, functional and reliable warheads that have nuclear arsenal. They need delivery capabilities, right? So the first question you have is, okay, how many and what type of nuclear weapons do I want to have? India and Pakistan are still answering this question. It is unclear how much is enough for India and Pakistan. It is unclear how much is enough for China, right? China has about estimated in the 200 to 400 thermonuclear weapons range arsenal size, but faced with U.S. missile defenses, conventional counterforce capabilities, it's unclear how much is enough for China, right? You need to be able to, a big piece of, answering this question is, a big concept in the Cold War was secure second strike capability. So we were worried about, the United States were worried about a bolt out of the blue first strike. We lose N number of weapons. We needed to have enough that would be able to survive that, not only in terms of numbers, but in deployment modes, right, where they were based and how they were based, to be able to retaliate back with certainty against the Soviet Union, such that it deterred the Soviet Union from trying to undertake what was known as a splendid first strike in the first place. Splendid first strike being the ability to fully wipe out your nuclear arsenal. So secure second strike capability is for states when they achieve a level of numbers and deployment modes such that an adversary cannot be confident that it can fully disarm that state's nuclear arsenal. Other question is, how do you deliver that, right? So most states start with aircraft. You've got aircraft, you rig them to carry nuclear weapons. But what's the problem with aircraft as a nuclear delivery capability? Yeah, you have to penetrate enemy defenses, right? You're not going to get there without a fight, so it's not the ideal type of delivery capability, right? We had strategic bombers.